Okay, this is my first time shooting a shop video, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I'm going to try to bring you along for some fork seal replacement in our vintage damping rod super simple forks. Nothing to these, no real moving parts. And there are two ways that we can go about getting the seals out of these, and I'm going to try to show you both. One way is more labor intensive than the other. The other way is simpler, but it's more difficult to install the seals. So we're going to try the more labor intensive method first, and that requires removing the hardware from the bottom of the fork. This is a pinch bolt for the axle. The other side is a pinch bolt for the axle nut. And inside the bottom of that fork leg, which you definitely can't see, is a 17mm bolt that threads into the bottom of the damping rod inside the fork. Sometimes you get lucky and you can spin that bolt right out, no problem, with an impact gun. Other times you need to fashion some sort of tool to hold the damping rod still. We're going to see if we get lucky today and see if it zips right out for us. So I believe it's a 17mm, but I bet the air compressor is out of air. Okay, we are back after letting the air compressor fill up. I have my 3/8 gun. She's pretty speedy. So we're going to see if this bolt will zip off without us having to come up with a tool to hold the damping rod inside the fork. We might have gotten lucky. Alright, so the bolt's not out completely, but I'm going to hold the fork extended completely and try to take the bolt out the rest of the way. And we got it. The bolt is out. There should be a copper washer or something. Alright, some kind of aluminum bushing there. And now the whole fork stanchion tube and lower will come apart. And there's the damping rod in the bottom of the fork tube. That stuff will all get set aside and cleaned because it's a little dirty. And here is what we need to work on. These forks have, it should only be 2 seals, but sort of looks like it might have 3 seals. We are going to find out together. We're going to gingerly clamp this in the vise. Gingerly, I do mean gingerly. And use something to pop those seals out. Nice big screwdriver works good for this mission. Get underneath the one seal. Out it comes. There's one. And yeah, it appears that there's just 2 seals. You want to be careful doing this because when you're prying on the top of the fork leg, you could damage it. These fork legs are soft. We don't want to chip a chunk out of them. Also, we don't want all that dirt to fall in there. So we might have to come up with another plan for pulling these seals out without hurting anything. Oh, and there we go. We got it out with the screwdriver after all. Okay. Well, there'll be a lot of editing in that part of the video. Clean this out nicely. Oh look, there is another seal in there. This fork had 3 seals in it. You might say, no, Drew, it had 2 seals and 1 dust wiper. And I'm not so convinced that was the case. Both the seals are small. They all look the same to me. Just looked like it had 2 7mm seals and one 10mm seal. And what I have to put in are 10mm seals, so I'm going to put 2 of these in. If they're the right size, which they are. So we are going to find an appropriately sized socket, which that is not. Maybe this one is. Nope. Scratch that. We use the seal driving toolkit. Let's see. Here's the right size. Nope. This one. I have to do it. Ooh, don't drop it in there. Bearing race and seal driver tool. Okay, we're going to put some grease in there, help everything go nice and smoothly. I'm going to take the first seal, start it in by hand gingerly, and I do mean gingerly. And then we're going to use the driver. Now push it in. That looks home to me. First seal in, second seal. And if the first one wasn't in far enough, this one I'll push it down. I'm pretty confident it's in the right way. And there she is. She is home. Let's see if I can bring you around for a close-up. There. So will that focus? There are 2 seals in there. Some more light over here for you. Now it's just as simple as a little bit more grease. Grease inside the seal itself so that nothing is dry when it goes together. These are NOS seals. They've been sitting up in an attic for God knows how long. So with any luck, the rubber's still rubbers. We're going to wipe off our fork stanchion after we scratch it against our drill bit. Here's our damping rod. Everything gets wiped clean. Nice and easy. Slide everything back down inside the fork. Lower. Ease that tube in through the new seals. Oop. Squirted a little. I'm going to clean up this bolt a little bit. Grungy. Some people will put thread locking compound, thread sealing compound like Teflon tape on this bolt, or some silicone. Well, you decide you need it after you put it together and it starts leaking. We're gonna roll the dice. We're gonna put that back in and hope it doesn't leak. Yeah. So this part is extra tricky. You have to get that bolt way up in there and get it started in the damping rod without pulling the damping rod away while you're trying to push the bolt in. And sometimes you need to get crafty with something like a broomstick And you can push up in there and hold the damping rod down while you try to start the bolt. So we're gonna try to do this the easy way first. See if we get lucky again. The bolt's not coming out. That means it got started. We might be in business, boys. Quick zip with the Ugga Dugga gun and see what happens. Nothing. It's all spinning. Up. There she is, boys. She's tight. Doesn't have to be super tight. Just got to be in there. And now, the fork doesn't come apart. Moves up and down nice and smoothly. And we'll consider that fixed. Next is reinstalling the spring and measuring out our oil level, which will be a job for tomorrow. Okay, so we're a few days later, and I skipped ahead. I finished assembling the other fork. I took this one apart, I swapped out the seals, I assembled it, but I wanted to bring you along for setting the oil level, which is one of the very few adjustments you have with these simple old forks. I'm running really thick motor oil, 30 weight in them. There's some arguments that fork oil has better anti-foaming and better heat resistance than regular motor oil. I don't know. Motor oil works fine for me, and it's a lot cheaper. It's important to measure the air gap at the top of the oil, between the oil and the fork cap. That essentially acts as a anti-bottoming spring because the air is compressible but the oil is not. A rule of thumb is sometimes to set it around 6 inches with the fork all the way compressed and the spring out. I'm running mine at 5.5 inches. You set that with, you know, a ruler or a tape measure. I have this handy little tool from Motion Pro. It was pretty cheap. It's a stainless steel tube with a stopper. You measure the distance here for the stopper. You set it on the top of the fork. You can add oil and you can subtract oil with the syringe. Additionally, though, I want to measure the amount of fork oil I'm putting in so that I can change the fork oil via the drain bolt and the fork cap with the fork still installed on the bike without having to remove the spring and compress everything. So if I want to do a fork oil change, if I want a lighter fork oil, if I want heavier fork oil, you know, I don't have to take the fork off the bike and pull the spring out or take the handlebars off to set the fork oil level. So I'm going to pour some fork oil in. I'm using a ratio right here. There is 250 cc's of oil in this ratio right. I'm going to pour all of that in. I'm going to work the air out, and I'm going to set the oil level with the syringe. So add the oil nice and slow. And the level is going to change as you bleed air out of the damping rod. In fact, I think I want to add a little bit more. So let's put another 50 cc's in. Now we'll start bleeding the air out just by cycling the damping rod. You can feel the resistance already as the oil is forced through the holes in the damping rod. Look for bubbles coming out. So now we're going to check our level. I already have this set at 5.5 inches. Now's the hard part. Oh, look at that. It's not even taking any oil out. That's interesting. Let's add a little bit more to make sure we're at the right level. Put another 50 cc's in. let's try this again. All right, we're taking some out, which means the level was a little bit high. We're trying to keep the fork as close to vertical as we can. All right, the syringe has stopped drawing, which means the oil level is right at the length of that lower piece of tube, which is 5.5 inches where I want it to be. So what I had 250, then I put in another 100 cc's for 350. Let's pour this back in there. See how much we took out. Almost exactly 50 cc's, which means this fork took 300 cc's to be at the height I wanted. And we will make note of that for next time. Now, we'll extend it. Slide the spring in. Carefully so it doesn't splash. Take the fork cap. Some of these are very fine thread. These particular forks are a very coarse thread.